Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of American Ballet Theater's Pop-Up Book Club, where we discuss upcoming ballets based on great works of literature. We are excited to have you with us today as we dive into one of the most dramatic works in the ABT repertoire, Onegin, based on the 1820s verse novel Yevgeny Onegin by the Russian poet Alexander Pushkin. I'm Claudia Bauer, and I'm a dance writer here in New York City. Onegin is one of my favorite ballets, and I'm delighted to be part of this conversation with our panelists, starting with the wonderful principal dancers He So and Cory Stearns, who will share insight into how they bring the characters to life through the choreography of the late John Cranko, who created Onegin for Stuttgart Ballet in 1965. He and Cory both joined ABT in 2005. Cory was promoted to principal dancer in 2011, and he was promoted to principal dancer in 2012. He and Cory have an interesting parallel history with this ballet. In 2012, they both debuted in its principal roles, Cory as Onegin and he as Tatiana, then reprised those roles in 2017 and are returning to them again this summer. Yet he and Cory have never performed these roles on stage together. He has a little technical issue, so we hope to have her here very soon. We are also joined by ABT Associate Artistic Director Clinton Luckett, who has decades of experience with Onegin, having performed nearly all of the ballet's principal roles and now as a coach on the artistic side, guiding ABT's dancers as they prepare for this summer's performances. And last, but by no means least, we have ABT's esteemed music director, Ormsby Wilkins, who will shed light on Onegin's beautiful score, created using existing pieces from Tchaikovsky's oeuvre by the late orchestrator Kurt Heinz Schulze. Now, ideally, we would also have the author with us on the panel today, but since Pushkin was killed in a duel in 1837, when he was 37 years old, I'm going to step in with some background. Yevgeny Onegin tells the story of the titular Onegin, a wealthy, self-centered young dandy who is bored with St. Petersburg high society and essentially with life itself. He moves to the countryside looking for new intrigue, and he finds exactly that when he meets the young poet Vladimir Lenski, Lenski's teenage fiancée Olga Larina, and Olga's bookish elder sister, the 17-year-old Tatiana, who quickly falls in love with him. Onegin's callous disregard for human emotion, including his own, leads to a cascade of tragedies. Not only does he break Tatiana's heart, but his careless dalliance with Olga also leads to a fatal duel with his friend Lenski. And by the time Onegin realizes that he truly does love Tatiana, it is too late for them to be together. Pushkin's novel was a turning point in Russian literature in many ways. It established the genre of the verse novel, a fictional work that has the storytelling arc of a novel but is written in verse rather than in prose, and the form Pushkin gave the poetry was also unique and is referred to as the Pushkin sonnet or the Onegin stanza. He wrote in metered 14-line sonnets, just like Shakespeare did, but Pushkin altered the structure a bit so he could introduce more nuanced, complex themes while still adhering to the rules of formal poetry. He also devised an extremely intricate rhyme scheme that further expanded his creative palette and works very naturally in Russian, but which also makes the novel very difficult to translate well into other languages, although it is read, loved, and argued about worldwide. Contemporary authors in a range of languages continue to write poetry using the sonnet form that Pushkin originated. But what truly made the book a landmark and an immediate success in Russia was that Pushkin focused on real-life people in real Russian settings and wrote in vernacular Russian language at a time when English, French, and German languages and themes were dominant. He wrote a human story that everyone could relate to while elevating the Russian language to literary status, which paved the way for later Russian writers such as Tolstoy, Turgenev, and Dostoevsky. These are among the many reasons why Pushkin is still considered Russia's national poet, nearly 200 years after the publication of Yevgeny Onegin. Now, our focus today is on why Onegin is such rich material for the stage, and I think Tchaikovsky himself said it best. When a friend suggested to Tchaikovsky that he turn Onegin into an opera, which he did in 1898, his first thought was that the idea was preposterous. But ultimately, like everyone else in Russia, He fell in love with the story, and in a letter to his brother, he described Onegin as a rare opportunity to, quote, convey through music everyday, simple, universally human emotions. How glad I am, he wrote, to be free of princesses, poisonings, and stilted effects of all kinds. What a mine of poetry there is in Onegin. Onegin himself goes through a huge evolution over the course of the story, from this careless 20-something to a man who has endured really great tragedies. So how is that conveyed in the choreography that you perform in the ballet?
Well, I think initially in Act One, um, the audience's introduction to Onegin is he he enters I guess it's Lenski's residence, and he first meets Olga and Lenski, and or he meets Olga and Tatiana for the first time, and he's just kind of got this distracted demeanor about him. He's a little bit aloof, a little bit of arrogance, and I I guess the choreography is supposed to represent his sort of um, vanity, and it's just consumed in himself, with himself, I guess. And then it's kind of similar in Act Two. There's just maybe a little bit more irritation expressed when he goes to the party, um, and maybe a little bit more. He acts a little bit more disrespectful towards Tatiana in Act Two. In one, it's like we have a nice pas de deux where he seems sort of poetic, but he's not. It's just more like, he's distracted, and he's trying to find his purpose. And but he's quite polite to um, Tatiana. And then at the end of Act One, there's a mirror pas de deux, which is kind of Tatiana's dream. So that's not the real Onegin. That's her idealized version of him. But there's not really a clear image of who he is in Act One. I guess Act Two probably represents uh, his his intellect a little bit more clearly. And then in Act Three, there's a lot of regret shown in the choreography. He is torn by his, I guess, newfound love for Tatiana after being away from her for a few years, and he sees her at this party, and he decides that they need to be together. And so he shows much more emotion. He shows more vulnerability. But that selfishness is still present in his character, kind of through all three acts. And the fact that in the Act Three pas de deux, when he professes his love, she is married, and he shows no respect for that.
So it's not an overstatement to say that this is one of the most dramatic ballets, but how do you convey all of that without being sort of overwrought, right? There's so much subtlety and gestures and things. Like, how do you do that? How do you
Yeah,
balance
that's
that?
that's a good question, Claudia. What I find is that when I first learn this ballet, and when I see other dancers first learning the ballet, a dancer's instinct is to dramatize the movement. And so what I've seen done with dancers debuting this role, Onegin or Tatiana, is they're taught you have to trust that the choreography, the physical movement, expresses the storyline accurately enough, and it does not require any extra embellishment. Um, there there certainly is no room for any excess faces that, where you're trying to show something. Maybe you're trying to emphasize an emotion. It's just it comes across as insincere, really. So you just trust the choreography. The choreography is brilliant. It tells you what it needs to, and the emotion that you feel and you convey should just correlate with the music and the choreography you're dancing. It's simple is better, less is more.
Let's see if he is audible. Are you there?
Hello. Can you hear
Okay,
me better now?
a little bit. We'll give it a shot. So from your perspective then, how do you convey, or how does Cranko convey through the choreography this huge arc for your character from young girl to wise woman?
I absolutely agree with Cory. I think the choreography has it all. I often say this is one of his masterwork and one of the masterwork I've danced. Uh, because it has it all, not only in dance, but the music. Uh, Ormsby probably can help me with this, but it was rearranged by oh,
Karl-Heinz Stolze was the
exactly. And he did a very wonderful job to rearrange this music to exact storyline. So I agree with Cory. As long as you're sincere with the story and your emotion, there's no excessive stuff that you need to add on to it.
You just dance it as is, really.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Clinton, can you speak to that at all with your experience, your vast experience with this ballet and coaching it?
Yes. So, the way Cranko he choreographed it very, very thoroughly. And the choreography is very precise. So the people who look after his work now, they really insist on dancers adhering to the choreographic text, if you will. Of course, every dancer is different. So immediately there's a difference just in the fact that they're different, um, but they keep sort of they really try to keep the dancers faithful to the text and to not take too many liberties with it. So as Cory was saying, if you just do the choreography as Cranko choreographed it, that really conveys the story because he did it so beautifully. There was there was a saying of Cranko that his belief was that as an audience member, you should be able to arrive at the theater late, get to your seat, sit down, not read the program, not look at anything, have the curtain go up, just watch the performance. And just watching it, you would understand absolutely perfectly what the story was and what everyone's relationships were. And, he achieves that, I think. It is very, very, very clear. The other thing that he sort of did was dispensed with the sort of traditional ballet mime. So there's not a lot of traditional ballet mime. The dancers gesture towards one another occasionally, but they don't really employ mime in the way that you see it in Giselle, Sleeping Beauty, or Swan Lake. It's in how they are and how they embody the choreography and the choreographic text that they tell the story. So Cranko just did a really terrific job of creating realism in the actual movement.
So this brings up an interesting question that I'm always intrigued by, which is the choreographer is the author of the ballet, right? But dancers are not machines, right? They are doing the choreography and yet they are making it their own. So perhaps, Clinton, Cory, and you all have a perspective on how does the dancer do that? And you can make it specific to this ballet, but I think it's also a really interesting general question about ballet.
Who is going to
Go ahead, Cory.
sorry, can you repeat what is your question? How we convey
Yeah,
it?
Clinton is talking about how the Cranko team insists on adherence to Cranko's author choreography, and yet you
Right.
as an artist get to make it your own as well, right? So
Yes.
how do you do that? How do you balance that?
Well, I mean, I think everyone is different, but they all experience similar emotions in terms of sadness or remorse or confidence and insecurity, but they all express it in different ways, and they all process it in different ways. And so basically, this protection that Clinton is referring to is just not, again, adding any fluff to the choreography. It's just abiding by the choreography honestly. And by honestly, I mean bringing your true emotions to Onegin or Tatiana for Hey, not doing anything disingenuously. And just with that, each dancer it'll be individual to each dancer. So each dancer will show a different version of Tatiana or Onegin, but it will be different. And I think in that sense, audiences might relate to one dancer more than another, even though it's the same story and the dancers are dancing it as rawly and accurately as they can. So the different casts do make quite a big difference, even in terms of the nuances, how they interact with each other and the chemistry between partners, for instance. And that's our relationships with our colleagues are reflected by how we dance together. And also when you collaborate with a fellow dancer in a role, it's a team effort. And so, through these weeks that we've been rehearsing it, and not just these 6 weeks leading up to the Met, but even before we went to OC. So for the past 2 months, really, we've been touching it. You make a kind of a game plan on how you're gonna convey this as honestly as possible. And so when the performance happens, like you really can see how each kind of team approached it and how they conveyed these emotions you're supposed to express. So it's kind of difficult to articulate, but for instance, I dance with Christine, and so when we're in
Shevchenko,
Christine
for anyone
Shevchenko,
who doesn't know.
And so when say we're rehearsing the Act 3 pas de deux, which is the very dramatic, vulnerable, remorseful pas de deux, there are certain steps that we will go through, technically, of course, to make it as efficient and accurate, easy as possible. But then, if I approach it in a certain way that doesn't resonate with her, then I'll try a different method of how I want to express something. Or if there's a certain role where we start moving away from each other because we're expressing something separate from we're not reacting, we're suddenly creating, then you have a situation where there's a disconnect. And so then we talk about how we can do that differently so that we remain connected throughout the pas de deux. And then so you create like a little script there that's still accurate to the choreography, but individual to each couple.
Mm-hmm.
So there is.
Oh, and I would imagine that the more you rehearse it and the more seamless all of the transitions become and all of the steps become and the more integrated that becomes, the more organically you can express yourself together.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, I feel like the approach to rehearsing most ballets is that you really have to get a sense of the technique first and establish how to do things correctly so that no one's getting injured or you're not wasting energy performing a lift incorrectly. And then once you have the technique set, then you can start thinking about the interpretation a little bit more.
Yeah. And how about for you? You've talked to me about how you are responding to the different characters on the stage as you're dancing, and that brings out the character for you. Can you talk about that when you're performing?
I'll have to piggyback along with Cory. When I'm dancing, it's, as he mentioned, I think of it as a team sport. I react to my partner. I react to the characters that are in it, and often I choose, when I said this ballet is poetic to me, is often I choose a word instead of try to make a sentence. So as long as the partner and the characters are in the scene that I'm dancing with, chose the same words, how we express that words could be different. So I think for me, the most important part for me, because I often get really wonderful partners that technically there won't be much of an issue, that we find the word that explain the whole scene. So it can't be too complicated. And through the rehearsal process, we'll find a way to make it clear to the audience what we're trying to do.
I'm going to go to Ormsby about the music. It's just absolutely such beautiful music, and yet it wasn't written as a written score specifically for this to tell this story. So how is it that the music is so perfectly suited to telling it?
Well, it's Tchaikovsky. So you're already ahead of the game using Tchaikovsky. Of course, you know, the ballet would not have existed without the opera because it was really, the opera is such a masterpiece. This is a masterpiece, but at the time, only the opera existed. And one of Tchaikovsky's great pieces. And I think that when you see the ballet, you realize that there are influences in the way the story is told in the opera that you can see in the ballet. So I think that it was obvious to, well, certainly I'm sure to Cranko said, I have to use Tchaikovsky, I can't. But and the idea, and initially I think there was some suggestion that they might use an arrangement of the music from the opera. But at the time, as I understand it, possibly the Royal Ballet was involved, but of course, Cranko was the director of the Stuttgart Ballet. But the Royal Ballet apparently was very sniffy about possibly using the opera in this way to rearrange it for the ballet. So they brought I think the principal conductor of Stuttgart Ballet was engaged to write a score using various different, perhaps not so well-known pieces of Tchaikovsky, which include a lot of piano pieces, which he of course had to arrange for orchestra, plus plus other works, some excerpts from fairly unknown operas of Tchaikovsky, and also perhaps the most well-known piece that he used really became the climax of the whole ballet, which is from his Francesca da Rimini symphonic fantasy, which was an absolutely masterstroke to use. So then his job was to try and put all these, obviously understand what Cranko was trying to express through each act, make the music tell the story as well as the choreography told the story. But he was able to find, obviously it's a dance piece, and there are dance pieces in the opera, and of course there are dance pieces, dance forms in the ballet, like the mazurka and polkas and polonaise, waltzes. And he found these mostly in the piano music of Tchaikovsky. And so then it was his job to try and make a thread, a continual thread through all this, make all the joins seem natural, and to make all the transitions from one piece to another seem natural, so that each act seemed like it could have been written by Tchaikovsky. I think that was the big challenge, that it always feels, it doesn't feel like it's a piece that's just been thrown, a lot of different pieces of music thrown together. It doesn't feel like that at all. It's really of the form, and it wasn't really something that was really in the dance world was a new type of making a story ballet, was to take already existing music and then make it into a three-act ballet. It was quite new, I think. I think I can't think of any offhand. It became something that a lot of people have done later on. Like Kenneth Macmillan has taken music from other music of Massenet and made Manon, and so on and so forth. So I think it was quite, I don't want to say revolutionary, but it was certainly a new thing. And I think it's just brilliant the way he tells the story through all these different pieces of music. And he uses some leitmotifs through, so you hear certain, Lenski's first entry onto the stage is his theme for his solo a little bit later on, And then in the what's called the mirror pas de deux, which is the main pas de deux of the first act, for Onegin and Tatiana, is actually a fragment from an opera for Romeo and Juliet that Tchaikovsky was considering. But that he brilliantly, at the end of the ballet, in the middle of Francesca da Rimini, when Onegin is trying to convince Tatiana that she should come over to his side, right in the middle of and eventually Tatiana does, in the middle of this pas de deux, just lets everything go and just completely, there's this incredibly passionate pas de deux going on. And he brings in the music from her dream that she had at the end of the first act. I mean, Karl-Heinz Stolze did. So there are things like that. There are things that link the whole piece together.
So he's using the techniques that a composer would use to write a complete score, and yet he's doing that to knit together music that's existing that wasn't written to be played together at all.
Exactly, yes. And that's the brilliance of this score, is that as I said before, that it doesn't feel like it's just a whole lot of pieces chosen. It all feels terribly organic. At least I think so. Yeah. And I think most people who do perform it really feel that.
Yeah, it's exquisitely beautiful, in my opinion. All right, so we have he back. So I would like to ask both of you, he and Cory, having danced this role or your roles numerous times over the course of your career, oh, he just disappeared. So we'll go to Cory. How has your perception of it changed, or the way that you interpret it changed as you've grown as a person and as an artist over the course of the last, I guess it's 12 years since you started performing it?
Yeah. I think it's just progressed organically. The more life experience I have, maybe the more honesty I can bring towards expressing an emotion, the more experience I can bring towards interpreting my character. Additionally, I think just as you age as an artist, you gain more understanding of who you are, and that's just as a person, not necessarily as an artist. But and you embrace your flaws, and so maybe you can dance with less insecurity, less doubt, and so I think it's maybe a little bit easier now compared to 2012 to dance maybe with less inhibition, less self consciousness, maybe. Yeah.
So, it would be very easy to portray Onegin as a straight up villain, but he's really not that. He's much more complex than that.
Yeah.
He's more human than that. And so do you feel that over the years you've gained more understanding of him as a person, or even more compassion or depth to the character?
Yeah, that's a good point. That I absolutely have. I think when you first learn a ballet, it's overwhelming. A 3-act ballet is a ton of information, and there are a lot of other pressures that you experience. Just knowing previous casts throughout history who have danced it, you uphold yourself to a certain standard, which puts pressure on there are all these things that you go through when you approach a ballet for the first time, and so yes, I think the first time I danced Onegin, the choreography, you can definitely interpret him as being a bit of an ass, I'd say. And so maybe it was a little bit superficial in that sense, that I approached certain situations in the ballet, certain choreography, interactions with Tatiana, a little bit more simply in terms of just him being cruel or rude. And now I definitely perceive there's much more nuance to his character. And I'm not saying that he's a victim, and I'm not saying that he shouldn't be accountable for his behavior towards the other characters in the play. But I think everybody in life has to develop themselves emotionally, and it's their responsibility. And I think he's just somebody that has been dealt a certain hand in life, and even though he's very rich, he has not had the opportunity to mature himself, and so he's kind of a victim of his circumstances. And so with that, I am able to, I think, yes, bring more depth to the character, and not, I think, again, it comes down to just detail and nuance. And that, so some of my interactions with Tatiana, there's a part in Act 2 in the play where he kind of shoves her because they dance together for a little bit, and then the other members of the party are standing around watching them. And in the novel, I think they're talking. He believes that they're whispering about a blooming romance between himself and Tatiana. And in the ballet, it's simplified and condensed so that when he looks around, he sees everybody whispering around him, and he kind of like shoves her away to just express this frustration over these whispers. And so that's just a part where just even how you put your hand on her back and how hard you push and what your face is doing as you push, you can express many different things. It can be an insecure thing, it could be a cruel thing, it can be disrespectful, all those things combined. And so, yes, your question is great. And that at this point, 12 years after I debuted it, I think I am a little bit more gentle in that particular moment, and maybe just expressing more of a personal issue than anger towards Tatiana.
Yeah, it's interesting because this ballet to me is sort of contradictory, right? It's lavish and beautiful, and there's ballrooms and, you know, formality, and yet the movement itself it has that really visceral quality to it. You're really, I mean, in typical ballets, man doesn't shove her, right? There's gestures or something, you know, there's something so immediate about the movement in this ballet that I just find so compelling, and it really tells the story.
Yes.
It's just in your face. How has your interpretation of Tatiana evolved over the years that you've been dancing that role and you've changed and grown as a person?
I think I'll still have the same idea of who Tatiana is, because I think it's heartbreaking and sad because she hasn't changed herself, and it doesn't explain or shown in the ballet. But her sister, Tatiana's sister Olga, after she lost her fiance, she carried on with her life and she married to someone else. But Tatiana, she stayed and lived with her parents for longer period of time until her mom said, you know, you really need to go ahead and get married. So I think her character is more straightforward in terms of like who she loves and she waits for him, but her character hasn't changed. So my only difference that I consider myself from like 12 years ago will be the last scene when she say no to Onegin. It's something that she will have to do against her thoughts and mind and her character. And I think that's what makes her character special, because she never does things like that. Even though she was rejected by Onegin many times and embarrassed by him in front of the whole party, she would never stop loving him. But at the end, she knows it's not. She finally speaks up for herself, and I think that's something that because I feel like that moment she's a grown enough woman to speak up for herself. Only at the very end of the ballet.
Yeah, it's a little painful to watch her take so much emotional punishment from him at the beginning of the ballet. You know, it's a little painful to watch that. Um, so Clinton, you know, when you're coaching dancers for the summer's performances, are you explaining to them the history of the story? Like, what context are you giving them to help them get into the headspace of characters? For example, what I just said about Tatiana, who behave in ways that we don't expect today anymore.
It depends on the particular rehearsal of the particular day. In the context of a rehearsal, it might come up that you start to have a discussion about like the historical context, but you know that doesn't happen all the time. Mainly, you're trying to help them manifest the emotions as clearly as possible as they master the choreography and work on the choreography. So first is to make sure everything's working properly, sort of as Cory was explaining before, technically, so that, you know, all of the, you know, it's like asking him to speak the words clearly or to pronounce everything and to enunciate, you know, like everything has to be enunciated. But then beyond that, it's the emotion that they're bringing to that particular moment in the ballet. Either you feel it's coming across and you feel like they're able to say and express what they are intending with the movement, or you might feel like, well, it's not really coming across. It's not really, I'm not getting what it is that you're trying to say. So um, if, one of the things I always say to dancers, what you feel and what the audience sees are not necessarily the same thing. And as a dancer, you feel all this stuff inside, and your first assumption is that everyone just sees it and understands it. And then you realize, oh, well, actually, maybe people don't actually see it the way I'm feeling it. So it's helping people arrive at the place where the audience is seeing what they want the audience to understand.
And Ormsby, what about for you? You know, conducting is such a mysterious thing. To anyone who's not a conductor, I guess. You know, how are you guiding the orchestra and while you're watching the dancers to make it all go together on an emotional level?
Yeah, I think that it's very important when whether you're doing it for the first time or doing it the fourth or fifth or sixth time. I've been doing this ballet for a very long time, and it just seems to you find, and the orchestra, our orchestra, the American Ballet Theatre Orchestra, has played it also many times, and I know they love coming back to it each time. And I think we all, and you know, the mystery part of it, I guess, is that somehow we find something new every time we do it. I mean, it just happens that there's something that catches your ear or you see, and you think, well, I didn't really think about that section so much the last time I did it or the previous times I've done it. And I see I can bring a little bit more intensity or less intensity, whatever it might be, to give it the ebb and flow of the musical ebb and flow. So I think it's really something that just comes with experience. And when when you're as lucky as I am to be able to do this piece over many years, you get to you mature, I guess, hopefully, and you find just new things in the score to really try and bring out. It's never the same from one performance to the next. And
That's
you're dealing with Tchaikovsky, and Tchaikovsky is so emotionally it's hard not to actually uh, to actually be in control with Tchaikovsky sometimes. Sometimes you have to have a sort of control because the emotions are so in front of you, on top of the skin, not under the skin. He just really grabs you so much. And this piece has a lot of subtlety in it. And I think at least this arrangement and this version has a lot of things that you have to keep in check. And the orchestration is a little bit different. It's not all big. It's quite chamber music, like in some ways. And that can be really lovely to try and bring out some of those, the more inner voices and some of the more delicate moments in the score, because there are big moments in it. So I don't know whether that's answering your question, but
well, I'm also curious to know, like, when you're watching the dancers on stage, like you're
right.
watching Cory or how much are you reading them and adapting to
I
their
can't help, I never watch Cory. I don't have to watch. No,
nap?
no, look, I think of course you do watch, but what you're trying not to do is follow. You're just keeping an eye out, because as I said, every performance is different. The dancers are going to be slightly different. They're going to phrase things without them even realizing it, slightly different, which doesn't mean it's not musical. It will be still musical. And we have two very musical dancers here. And really, I don't have to worry so much. But I can't help watching because the dancers give me inspiration as well when I'm watching. I love to watch. And it's a balance between making sure the orchestra is taken care of and everything that they need to be taken care of, and also, the phrase, Cranko was so beautiful in his musical phrasing. I mean, he really does, is one of the greatest of choreographers in that regard. And you really just have to follow that phrasing and you're fine. And yes, I watch the dances, but it's not slavish following. It's just getting inspiration and making sure that the certain points you meet together at certain points, and that you feel that they are comfortable in what they're trying to express musically as well as everything else.
Clinton, you're nodding. Do you have a insight to share?
It's just Cranko's musicality. When the choreographer is musical and the text, if you will, that he creates is utilizing the music in the way that Cranko does, then that's half of the battle right there. And again, the dancer just, if you follow, well, the phrases just have a natural musicality to them that aligns the dancer with the music. And then if you follow the phrasing as he's done it, then that's really, it takes you halfway there.
Yeah.
If I may just, sorry, if I
Go
may
ahead.
just add a little bit, I think having worked on this a lot, I think there is the people that are staged. I mean, Reed Anderson has staged it many times. Who will be doing the final staging for it again for us again this time. I think they're not. Even though the choreography is very specific and how it works with the music is specific, and the details are very important, I think they allow for some different types of phrasing within the musical structure, within the choreographic construction. I think this ballet allows personal interpretation while still sticking to the text. while still sticking to the musicality, the basic musicality. But I think everyone can bring something different musically to it because it allows for that. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the ideal performed work of art, right? Something that lives anew each time it's performed, I think.
Yeah.
And Cory and do you have any thoughts on the music or favorite sections of the music and why?
Can I add one experience with Ormsby? I often, until recently, I guess I often dance on the count. And a few years back, it wasn't Onegin, it was Fire Ormsby was conducting for me. And I experienced, like I danced in a melody. For the first, in the orchestration, I felt it in the first time that we danced together, me and the conductor danced together. And then the thrill that I got, that I felt like not only just me and my dancing or me dancing with my partner, but dancing with the music, that was such a thrilling and fulfillment feeling that I've gotten. And I just want to thank you, conductor, for giving that incredible experience to me a few years back. And then after that, when people are saying the dancers needs to be musical, I thought it meant you dance on the right count. But when you actually, that musicality is part of your dancing, it's incredible. And I think Cranko have done a wonderful things, because when we're saying it's a masterpiece, he's done the music and the dance goes along together. I think that, like, I finally understands what it means. And I think the part, the music, the part that I enjoy listening and also dancing the most, I think it will be at the end of the ballet. Onegin comes back to Tatiana and he begs for the last chance. And she says no. She says no a couple times in the partiture, but when her final no is on a note, and after that, after Onegin exit the stage, she runs and screams, and she let all her emotions out at the end of the ballet, and that will be my favorite part of the music and favorite part of the ballet as well.
Why is it your favorite?
Because I think she's in the whole ballet, she always contains herself. She tries to express herself, but she hasn't found her way to express herself in the right way, or more to probably to Onegin, not sophisticated enough way for Onegin to like her. So she always contains herself, but at the end, she lost Onegin. I think in a way she always had some kind of hope that her love for Onegin, even though she was in a very happy or content life with her husband, I think there's always a little hope in her. But she lost that. She lost completely at the end of the ballet. And it's to me, it was so tragic. It's such a tragic moment because she let all her emotions out and she finally admits herself that there's no hope between her and her greatest love that she had. It's all in past. There's no more future in her. And I think that is very tragic moment, and I think that's because that's my favorite moment in the ballet.
How about you, Cory? Do you have a particular section of the music that you love to dance to the most, or you find the most expressive?
My favorite is actually all the music surrounding the duel. So Lenski's solo before our pas de quatre, where I come in, Tatiana and Olga are begging him to, I guess they're begging him, I don't know how do you say it, but remove his challenge for a duel,
Mm-hmm.
or withdraw it.
Withdraw it, yeah.
And so all that music, I just think it's such a beautiful solo Lenski dances, and then it just builds up to that duel, and then just to finish the act with that that look when I walk on stage, and Tatiana kind of looks at me from the feet up to my face, and then the curtain closes with Onegin kind of collapsing with his head in his hands in remorse. It's very powerful and impactful.
Yeah, it's absolutely searing. I think it's just so profound. Ormsby, can you talk about the music for that scene?
Yes, I think it's interesting that I mean, I love the end of the ballet too. That piece of the melody, the initial melody where they start actually dancing, is just the most heartbreaking melody just on the clarinet, on the solo clarinet, and just pizzicato strings. It's heartbreaking, and then the way Tchaikovsky builds it and develops it, and then the way where I think that Tatiana almost does have almost a bit of hope in the middle of the pas de deux when that music from the first act comes back, but that soon passes, and then she says, no, I can't, and rips up the letter and all that. But that's all wonderful. But what Cory is talking about at the end of the second act, what is amazing is that after he's killed Lenski and he comes back on, that music is referring to his first solo. That is the music of his first solo. So, except it's just, instead of it being more a melancholy, it's incredible, tragic, sad, huge. I mean, it comes on with a huge orchestral crescendo into that melody in a different key, and it has a completely different feel to it. But it's so. This is one of those moments that was so brilliant about Karlheinz Stolze, was to use these leitmotifs and change them for a different situation. So I do love the end of the second act too.
Yeah, I know you love the Francesca.
I mean, it's so heartbreaking, and the way it builds towards that is amazing.
Yeah. So we've probably pre-answered this question, but I do want to ask you, Cory, you have called this, a dancer's ballet, and obviously it's danced all over the world. So many dancers, just their dream is to dance it. And why is that?
I think it kind of goes back to what Clinton was talking about earlier, how the text that Cranko presents is so thorough, and it's an opportunity for a dancer to just really delve into themselves and present something extremely honest, present themselves honestly. It's this ballet is less metaphorical than most Petipa classical ballets, and I would compare it more towards like Macmillan ballets like Manon or Romeo, in that it's the emotions brought forth maybe are more relevant to modern times, and so I feel like maybe perhaps more relatable from an audience standpoint, but definitely from a dancer standpoint. And so I just think it's, for me personally, it feels like a privilege to dance, because it's one of those ballets that it's really hard to fake. I don't know, and it sounds bad to say that you fake any sort of role you dance, but when you're a fairy, or you're an astrologer, or whatever else, you're some evil sorcerer, you really got to create that in your mind. You have no personal experience. So when you get to dance the role, where you have a lot of relevant personal experience, it feels very, the experience is very fulfilling. You feel very vulnerable in rehearsals, and then when you let it out on stage, it's almost like a therapeutic effect to that. And so when you can bring that honesty to the stage and then collaborate with your partner and they can bring the same honesty, you create sort of like a magic, sort of type of magic. You establish this relationship together that's very special, that is very difficult to create in any other setting, that is really unique to the stage and the studio. And so when it comes together and you reveal yourselves and you perform it, Onegin just feels like an absolute privilege to dance.
Wonderful. Well, that's a great note to end on, and we are at the end of our time. So I want to extend a huge thank you to our panelists for generously sharing your time and knowledge today. And thanks to everyone watching for joining us as we learned more about this amazing ballet. And you can see American Ballet Theatre perform Onegin during the 2024 summer season, which will open on Tuesday, June 18th, and run for 7 performances through Saturday, June 22nd at the Met. And in keeping with their parallel lives in this ballet, Cory and Hay will be dancing on the same days, but in different performances. Cory will dance in the matinee on Wednesday, June 19th, while he will dance that evening. And then on Saturday, the 22nd, he will perform in the matinee and Cory will perform in the evening. So we look forward to seeing all of ABT's fabulous dancers on stage and to seeing you at the Met. Thank you again for joining us and have a wonderful evening.